Thanks, Sheila. So quick introductions. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Andy Bates. I'm a member of the National Executive of the Labour Housing Group. My day job's also a manager of a tenant managed organisation. So I've been excited about a number of the in conversations we've done, but I'm particularly excited about tonight's in conversation. So some of you might remember that kind of Marianne Hood came and talked to us about the current social regulation. I think it's still a bill. And her big criticism of it is it gave rights to individual tenants, but not collective rights to tenants. So I'm really interested in what Denise Fowler's going to say about this, and I'm sure it's going to be very exciting. So just to give you the quickest introduction to Denise, so she's worked for the government, the DCLG as a policy advisor.
Sorry, no, I was Director of Legal Services, Andy.
Oh, right, thank you. Okay. Also, Denise was the ombudsman, which is a really important role. Chief executive of what Denise describes as a great housing association, women's pioneer that came out of the suffragette movement, and she's now chief executive of Phoenix Community Housing. So Denise, over to you to tell us about the kind of great resident engagement work that Phoenix Community Housing's up to.
Thanks, Andy. That's great. So it's lovely to talk to everyone. This is my second visit to the Labour Housing Group, and the last time I talked about women and housing, and this time I'm going to talk about building a culture of resident involvement, and with reference to Phoenix's community gateway model. And as Andy says, you know, this has gone up the agenda since Grenfell and the sad death of Arab Ishak, and there's been lots of talk about what does good resident involvement mean. And I think from my point of view, the community gateway model is a really excellent model for ensuring that residents are involved in decision making at every level, and that there's a true partnership between staff and residents. On its own, it doesn't solve all of the issues we've got in the sector, and we can maybe talk about that afterwards, but I think it gives us a framework within which to discuss the issues that we're facing with tenants and to explore the ways of tackling them. So I'm going to try, I'm not very familiar with Zoom, but I'm going to try and share my screen and then take you through a bit of a presentation, and then maybe we can have some questions afterwards. So Andy, you're going to have to tell me whether this has worked. Can you all now see a slide that says
all good.
Building
all good, Denise. Yep. Brilliant.
Okay, so straight on to the first slide. This is Phoenix's vision, and I think it informs everything we're doing. It says together we're building a better future for our Phoenix community. So Phoenix Community Housing was a large-scale voluntary transfer from Lewisham, and we've since taken on developed some properties and also taken on some 1,500 from London and Quadrant. But we've still got just under 8,000 properties, all very closely located to each other. So our head office is called the Green Man, and it's a community hub. It has a community centre on the ground floor and our office is upstairs, and there's an atrium between the two. So staff are always connected with tenants. And staff walk through the community centre every morning to come into work. So there is that immediate connection. But the Green Man is right in the centre of our all our estates, and I think the furthest away is about 3.5 miles away from that. But it means we are very much placemakers. We've got a very strong role in that community and working with that community. And these are our values, which again were developed in consultation with residents, community, as I said, but also focus on customer. We are working in partnership with residents, and we are aiming at developing our community and making links with other community organisations, the health service, the local authority, education and others. But in amongst all of that, we are also delivering a service which our tenants pay for. So we don't forget the fact that we're also providing service delivery. It's not just about, working together and getting on well and getting that sense of community. It's also about delivering the basic services as a landlord. But we always do that in collaboration, and we've expanded that recently to look at community links areas, 4 community links areas across our stock, each with about 2,000 properties, and dedicated teams working in the virtual teams that work in those. So 3 housing officers in each area, teams of caretakers, estate services officers, and then lead people from every other service across our service, so that they meet monthly and they do regular meetings with tenants in each area, so that they get to know what's going on in Bellingham, what's going on in Downham, what's happening in Grove Park, what do we need to do together to resolve things. And those meetings are now starting to expand out to include, as I was saying, I think some people might have heard at the beginning of this call too, leads from the primary care networks, from the local authority social care, from Family Thrive, which is an organisation that works with families with challenges who are just below the threshold of needing social workers but often need some support. We're starting to work with schools, and the idea is that we work together to help those who live in our community to have a better life, really, and to tackle all things. And we're conscious, under a time of really tight resources for everyone, we can do a lot more together than we can on our own. And then we have another value, which is about consideration, which is that we can have the best policies and procedures in the world and we can do it all, but we'll always have to vary those to meet individual circumstances, and to look at, whether or not there's a need to move from those policies, and to really consider the individual needs of those we provide a service to. But when we're doing all of that, our tenants are in charge. So Phoenix is, as I said, is a large-scale voluntary transfer from Lewisham, and back in the early 2000s, Lewisham decided to transfer its stock to access because they couldn't access decent homes money as a council. So, like many other local authorities, they decided to transfer. But instead of either transferring to one other big housing association, they parcelled up their homes, and there are a wide variety of housing associations who now manage homes in Lewisham. In South Lewisham, when they went to talk when the council tried to talk to tenants said, that's fine, we don't mind having a housing association managing our homes, but if we're going to do that, then we want to run it. And at that point, no one quite knew what that model looked like. But our first chair, and really the woman who was the inspiration behind establishing Phoenix, Pat Fordham, who's on the top left corner, she's in the 2 pictures on the left, one of them telling everyone how it is, which is very Pat, and the other one actually signing the document for transfer. And Pat and a group of other tenant activists went to a TPAS conference, and they got a bit bored with the main conference, so they wandered off and happened to walk into a room where Preston Community Gateway, which is the first community gateway in the country, the tenants from that were on stage talking about their community gateway model. And Pat said, that's it, that's what we want. And so we adopted the same model, which means that our tenants own it. Our tenants are the majority on the board. Our chair is always a tenant, and we have resident involvement at every level of decision making. So Phoenix was born from activism right from the start, and that's still very much part of our ethos. And tenants are very clear that Phoenix would not exist without them, and that it's often said, tenants pay our rent, tenants employ us. It feels very real in Phoenix, that sense. And here's our current chair, the wonderful Carmen Simpson, who is just as passionate as Pat ever was, and is an incredibly strong, but also she has a background in working in tenant participation before she became involved with Phoenix when she retired. She's a tenant. She's really taken us to the next level in terms of where we want to be as an organisation. Yep. I'm trying to rush through this, but the 4 principles of the Phoenix Gateway model are firstly resident leadership, and on our board we've got 12 positions on our board. Of those, 6 are for residents, 5 for tenants, 1 for a leaseholder, 4 are for independents, and 2 are for councillors. So currently we're down 1 independent. We've got 6 residents, 3 independents, and 2 councillors. But also residents are then involved in all the committees who have delegated authority to do with things. And our resident experience committee has, I think 80% of the places on that committee, which has the power to choose to decide on all of our policies around asset management and tenancy management and asset management are tenants. But there are also tenants on our audit and risk committee and on our development committee and on our remuneration and HR and remuneration conference committee. And then below that, there is our Phoenix Gateway, which is the bridge really between wider consultation with residents. And that's a forum of 30 involved residents. And there are some groups off that. So the scrutiny panel is a group from that, and a communications group. All letters that go out to more than 50 residents are scrutinised by the comms group. The scrutiny panel do regular reviews. We do a lot of wider consultation, which I'll talk about in a minute, and all of that consultation feeds into the gateway. And when we're thinking of a new policy or procedure, we talk about the principles first at the gateway, and then the more worked up policy will go to the committees, and either they'll agree it, or if it's something that's reserved to board, they'll make recommendations to go up to board. The gateway also advises us on how we should consult on things. And sometimes when we come and say how we've consulted on an issue, they'll say that's not enough, go away, come back and do something different. Or they might themselves decide to lead some of the consultation. Third, I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute, but the third principle is that all voices are heard. And this has developed over time. I think when Phoenix started, having started in that as a campaign and with activists who are used to being involved in community organisations and attending committees, it was a very formal structure, and people had no problem with being in committee meetings till midnight and holding people to account. I think the board met monthly, and lots of people would, the same group of tenants gave up huge amounts of time. As we've expanded, and actually as some of the original residents have got older, that history of that kind of culture of that kind of engagement isn't right for everyone. Some people want to engage online. Some younger tenants didn't feel they wanted to meet separately to particularly raise their issues. Issues around equality, diversity and inclusion, who feels comfortable and making sure that everyone feels part of it. So we've developed the way that we ensure that we hear from all residents, but we still go through the formal structure with all the information that's gone from them. And I'll talk a bit more about that afterwards. And finally, resident ownership. Our residents have the right to be shareholders, and they own Phoenix, and they exercise their powers at their AGM, at the AGM. We have a gold membership scheme which gives people incentives to join. The thing I was talking about, this is how we see our resident involvement pyramid. It's not necessarily about who's more, obviously the board and committees take the ultimate decisions, but in practice it's a little bit more fluid than this. But this is the idea that all of our engagement with residents is an opportunity to hear what residents think. And every time any of our staff are talking to residents or getting, and all the touch points, people should be thinking, well, there's an issue here, or there isn't an issue here. Someone's raised something that has a wider theme than that individual engagement. But also from residents' point of view, when you ask residents whether or not they feel that their voice was heard, often they will talk about whether or not they felt respected and listened to in those individual conversations about a particular issue for them. And on this level, we do quite well. The tenant satisfaction measures have just come out, and one of the issues is Do you feel that your landlord treats you with fairness and respect? And we get 87%. One of the things we do is a survey of residents. We do it quarterly by an independent organisation, and we do it anonymously so people can say what they think. And over the course of last year, we 52% of our residents, so over 4,000 residents, completed the telephone survey, and we've got their information. 87% of those felt that we treated them fairly and with respect. Which, when we come on to how we build that kind of attitude and ethos, is really important. I think it does go through actually being a community gateway model, does break down a lot of that them and us attitude. It does break down a sense of stigma around residents or assumptions about who residents are and what they, all of the stigmatizing views about residents. Then we do specific wider resident consultation and feedback, including the quarterly surveys, chat and chips. I'll come and talk about that in a minute. Community links, meetings, diversity meetings, we do a lot of stuff. Then we have other resident involvement in decision making. So whenever we whenever we appoint someone on the interview panel, a resident sits on the interview panel, and that's for every role in the organisation. It's usually one resident. By the time it gets to the chief exec, I went into a room, and the whole room was full of involved residents just seated in a big wide circle, and they put me on a chair on wheels in the middle, and there was absolutely no agreed questions. Everyone just fired questions at me, and I kind of wheeled round and answered them, and that was a test of a new chief exec. Can you cope with that? And I have to say, some of those questions were the most challenging of any of them that I have. So, for example, one of the things, I also had a formal interview with the board, of course, and presentations and things like that. And one of the things I was talking about was the fact that I've lived in Lewisham for 28 years, and I see myself as part of the local community. And, this is an amazing opportunity to work in my local community and make a contribution to that community. And that went down very well with the board and with others. One of the tenants, though, said, "Oh, I see you just want a short walk to work." I was like, no, honestly, that's not it. I do actually just want to make a difference. And, it was very funny, and it was really helpful. But it's no holds barred, and the residents who are involved on the other, we don't put anyone except the chief exec through that. Everyone else just has a resident on the panel, and all of those residents have been through recruitment training and recruit in exactly the same way as our staff. But we've got a very good pool of residents, and we do the same around procurement. And it's amazing how residents spot the contractor who is talking the talk but not necessarily going to walk the walk. Then we've got our Phoenix Gateway, which, as I say, is the bridge between all of the other areas where we consult, and then the formal board and committees. And then these are just some ways in which we consult. So this is quite a formal consultation. This was the consultation on our corporate plan. Everyone, as all housing associations and local authorities are facing real challenges at the moment financially. We've got the cost of living crisis, we've got the lingering impact of Brexit, which means that our costs are going up. The cost for everything we buy, whether it's from doors or paying for contractors, everything we do, the supply of materials has gone up massively, and labour costs have gone up massively, and recruiting and finding staff is much more difficult than it used to be. At the same time, the demands on us have gone up, quite rightly. We've all reviewed what we're doing around health and safety and the quality of our stock, and so we've got to increase investment in those areas. That the need to do that meant that we had to make choices about some of the other things that we'd done at Phoenix, which were lovely, but there was a real this consultation was a real hard-nosed, okay, is it this or that? Every year we previously did the Phoenix Festival, which was fantastic. We had this big festival, and we funded subsidised a fair, a fun fair, and we had all these different activities, and then all the different teams would be there, and it was a really fantastic event. But the first time I went, I realised that about 60% of the people weren't Phoenix residents who were going to it, because it was in a local park. So tenants were paying for other people to have a great day out with their kids. It was brilliant in PR terms. But in terms of a priority, we moved all the money that had gone into that this year into our hardship fund. And that was part of the conversation that went on with residents. Similarly, we've reduced our fencing programme in order to put more money into damp and mould. But all of those decisions, ultimately they're decisions of the board, but it was all informed by these conversations with residents. And that means that we've had much less pushback than we would have done, because people were part of the discussion going, as we got to that decision. And I think sometimes when people do resident involvement, they pick the easy things to involve people in. Well, these were really tough, difficult conversations saying we can't have it all. The presentation that was given to residents in the discussion was included pretty much all the key information that went into the board paper. So it included financially what the rent cap meant in terms of the loss over the 40 years of our financial plan, how much carbon net zero was going to cost us, how much getting all our homes to EPC was going to cost us, how much the fencing program costs. So people actually had a real conversation. And those conversations continue not just in those formal meetings, but in smaller meetings, in meetings led by tenants. Sometimes they're things that are led by particular groups of tenants. So the one in the bottom right here is something that's led by our Phoenix Youth Council to look at the needs of young people in one of our estates, Downham, and working with London Revolution to get some funding in to address some of those issues. On the top left is Carmen, who attends very many of our events, is a natural networker, and people will say things to her that I don't think they'd ever say to a member of staff about what they think, and we get amazing, she's very good at talking and explaining decisions and then feeding back. And there are other things, and then here are the, we always, when we're going out and having an in-person event, we also mirror that online, and there's a survey monkey that people can go in, and so that's someone sort of filling it out on their mobile phone. As I say, that's all underpinned by the information we get through from this large scale survey that we're doing every year. So last year we did 52%. This year we're aiming to get the other half of the Phoenix tenants. So in 2 years we'll have heard from everyone. And then this is my favourite consultation event that we do, or one of my favourites actually. So I've got some more on the next one, which are also good. This is Chat and Chips. So we take a chip van onto the estates, rock up on the estates, park the chip van. We have a series of stalls by every team in the business, and people go around, they talk to the repairs team, or they talk to their housing officers, or they talk to the building safety team, and we will consult on issues we want to do, but it's also an opportunity for people to raise any issues they have, and then we take the details from that and we make sure we get back to everyone. And if you go to every stall, you get a stamp on a card, and then you go and get a free fish and chip or halloumi and chips supper, and everyone sits down with their neighbours and chats, and staff, when all the tenants have got their fish and chips or whatever, then the staff who are left can do it as well, and they sit down, and it builds community and a sense of partnership, a sense of equality. And then, these are some of the events we do to make sure that we are reaching all our communities, and we're very conscious that even if we do everything we can to be open and inclusive, some communities won't have that level of trust, and we need to specifically target communities to ensure that people feel that this is their Phoenix too. So these are just some of the diversity events we do every year. Top left is the International Women's Day, top right is Black History Month, top left is Disability Awareness Day, bottom right is Pride, our Pride event. And on all of these events, we try to mix a lot of fun, and people have a really good time. I think at the Pride event, we had some hand massage. I think we had tie-dye for children. At the Black History Month, we had a dance group and a drumming group and all things, but equally there is a serious debate. It's not all about that. It's not all about just having a nice time. I mean, I've seen too many Pride events, for example, where it's all about rainbows and cupcakes. and that isn't really addressing the needs of diverse communities. So this Pride event talked about same-sex reproductive rights, and I talked about a bit of my experience as a lesbian mother. The Black History Month was talking about health inequalities in Lewisham. There's a fantastic study that talked about health inequalities in Lewisham and in Birmingham. In disability awareness, we had a fashion model who was talking about her experience of visibility and representation. And I wasn't sure before that meeting whether or not that would resonate with some of our residents. But here's Pat again on the left, who was our founder, and she loved it. She told everyone, there were some people talking while the speech was on, and she told everyone to be quiet because it mattered, and this was an example of visibility and representation. And you know, it was great. That these events are really buzzy, and 35% of the people who attend these events have never attended any other Phoenix events. So we know that these are really important. Other work we do to try to overcome barriers that people might have to resident involvement. All our events have, you know, food put on and people get engaged. We have digital inclusion, so we've got funding to provide data to people and to provide laptops and other equipment. We have a digital inclusion team who sit in our community centre hub twice a week, and people can come in with their mobiles or their laptops or their tablets, and they will get them working again if they've stopped working and help people to use them. And it makes a huge difference to people's, you know, ability. You know, it breaks down social exclusion. So many people are excluded now if they can't get online. We do events, activities for children at all our events, so people can bring their kids and still attend. We have sign interpretation. I've used sign language here for people who have hearing issues, difficulties, but obviously we have other languages as well. And then, as I said, we have fun. This is Carmen again. I've forgotten how often Carmen's in this, but she's enjoying herself at one of the dance things. In fact, we had to drag her out to give her speech at that point because she was so into the dancing. But she's a pro, so she just walked straight from completely out of breath and then just launched straight into it. And this is probably the biggest thing that makes a difference to a sense of equality and partnership in the partnership working between tenants and staff, which is our Phoenix Academy. And I know Andy knows all about this because some of his staff have attended. So we were, I think, the first housing association in the country accredited with the Chartered Institute of Housing. And given the new professionalism agenda, this will really become more important to deliver CIH qualifications, but we do them locally and we do them online, so that gives the ability for people to access, and we pay for residents to attend level 1 and 2, and if you're an involved resident involved in the Phoenix Community Gateway or the one of the committees or the board, then we'll pay all the way up to level 4. So people will end up with a formal qualification, and quite a few residents have ended up working in housing as a result. But also those residents who don't go on to pursue a career in housing but are involved in our governance structures have that grounding and understanding of the sector and the issues that we're grappling with, which builds confidence and makes people more willing to speak up. Also, they've got to know staff, residents have got to know staff, and staff have got to know residents on the courses, because we don't do a residence course and a staff course. Everyone learns together, and people realise no one knows everything. None of us are experts, and we're all learning together, and our different perspectives are valuable, and that makes a huge difference, I think, to people's confidence. So a number of these people, there's Simon, there's Fowler Sade, I'm trying to see, a number of these people have ended up on our board or involved in the Gateway. Brilliant. And this whole engagement and continuous engagement in decision making means that staff really, it does impact on staff attitudes, and we do get an awful lot of discretionary effort from staff. So the top left is the repairs team, and this was during Storm Eunice, and I'd worked in another very good housing association, and we'd had a flood, and we were very heavily reliant on contractors, and it took some time to deal with the issues. The storm hit, and within seconds I was getting pictures sent to me by email by one of the caretakers, Mickey Stokes, who's like, tree down Beckenham Park, we're diverting traffic, we've sorted this, Mrs. So-and-so's without water, we've taken her some water, we've done this, we've done that. And this is them, they came in all throughout the weekend, and we provided pizza so that by the Monday morning, everyone who'd been seriously affected by the storm had had their repairs done, and it was sorted. And that comes about, I mean, we paid overtime, but that wasn't the reason they came in. They came in because this is their Phoenix and they wanted to get it sorted. In the middle picture, that's Santa's sleigh. Our Linda, who's one of our resident liaison officers, gets the joy of dressing up as an elf. I've forgotten who was Father Christmas this year, but staff dress up as Father Christmas and elves, and we get, relatively cheap presents, things like, books from the works or whatever. Some of them donated, some of them we pay for, and residents sign up, and we go around the estates, and the kids come to see Father Christmas and get their presents. And then some of the other two are just consultations or meetings, people working together. But I think all of this just builds trust with residents. So when we get things wrong, because we do get things wrong, every housing association gets them wrong, residents are more willing to accept that we've made a mistake, but it's not because we're awful people, it's just because genuinely we've made a mistake, because they've got other examples of meeting those staff and knowing that they do care and that they are interested. So this is a lovely quote, and I think, it's not just a PR thing. I think it does reflect how we are. People do really try. Sometimes our systems and processes let them down, and that's the big thing I'm finding. But by and large, it's not an issue with the staff. Yeah, that's us. So I'm happy to talk about how, I think I've talked more about the cultural things than about the detail, and I'm happy to do a bit more about detail, but I hope that's helpful. And I'll just stop the sharing. I'm happy to circulate this presentation afterwards if people want to see the pictures again.
Oh, sorry, if somebody could put themselves on mute. So I'm just getting some background noise.
I can't hear you, Andy. Let me just see if something's gone.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now, Denise? So, Denise, are you hearing us?
Andy, I can't hear you. Can other people hear you? Is it just me? If it's me, I'll leave and come back in again.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you wouldn't mind.
Okay, I'll be out and I'll come back.
Okay, if we can just pause for a couple of minutes. So, Nigel, I can see you. I'm going to misuse my. Okay.
Yeah, and I can hear you again, Andy.
Oh,
Sorry,
right,
something
brilliant.
went wrong with my audio. So, yes, apologies about that. I hope that was helpful anyway, and I'm happy to, discuss any questions.
So, Denise, I knew it was going to be inspirational, but it was really inspirational. Can I take you on to national policy? So, yeah. We've got a shadow Secretary of State, Lisa Nandy, who we've got huge hopes for, and really hope that she's going to become Secretary of State. Committed to giving tenants a voice, committed and also committed to taking a really kind of positive approach to the collective empowerment of tenants. Yep. If you were her policy advisor, what would you be suggesting to her?
I think it's difficult to apply the community model, gateway model, to larger HAs. So I think it's about taking those 4 principles, really, and I do think that there is an element, any housing, some of them are applicable even if you don't take the whole community gateway, because I think there is something about us building a community locally, and we do benefit from being so co-located and in associations which are very large or more disparate in terms of their stock. It's harder to develop it. We did do it. You did do some elements, quite a lot of the elements of this at Women's Pioneer, even though it was based in 8 different London boroughs, because there was a community of women who wanted to work together. But I suppose if I was talking to Lisa Mandy, I was saying, well, which of those principles could apply? So could we have, in terms of the regulation of housing associations, what do we mean by it may not be a fully resident-led association, but how are residents involved in your leadership? And how are residents involved at every level of decision making? It doesn't have to be the community gateway model, but can you show that residents are involved in recruitment, in evaluating contractors? Can you show that residents are involved in overseeing how you consult with other residents? And can you, what have you done to make sure that all voices are heard? And it's a bit more than just saying you've done the surveys. I think our surveys are great and they're helpful, but then what happens is the results from those surveys are then fed into the Phoenix Gateway. So the Gateway reviews the performance in relation to those tenant satisfaction measures, you know, once a quarter, and says, okay, there's some themes here. I'd like to do a deep dive and I'd like to look at it. So I think it would be about having regulation which said, how have you applied those principles and are they real? And it isn't enough to just have a resident on the board. It isn't enough just to have said you've got feedback. It's about saying, well, now we've got this feedback. How are residents involved in the decisions about how we respond to that feedback? So I don't know if that's helpful. I think that's.
Yeah, really helpful. If I can just ask a follow on, I know Nigel and John are waiting.
No,
Yeah.
let the members the bloody answer. You can do it after. Seriously, let Nigel in.
All right, one more, and then I'll bring you to it.
Fucking hell.
John.
On my language.
All right, so second follow-on question from that. Lots of organisations put work into resident engagement. How would you describe your resident engagement making a real positive difference?
I think the difference is moving on from engagement to involvement in the decision making. So lots of people do. So it's a bit like what I said about the Pride cupcakes. It's not enough just to have met with lots of residents. It's how does residents give up their time? Their time is valuable. So one of the big things that our residents say to us is, if we're going to get involved in a meeting or if we're going to fill in a survey, I want to know when and how you're going to tell me how that's influenced the decision. So, for example, our tenant satisfaction results on complaint handling went down, and we discussed that. We went out, did a talk to tenants about that, and we agreed to set up a customer journey mapping session where the approach that was agreed was that we contacted our 12 most unhappy complainants, and we asked them to walk us through the process and tell us what had gone wrong. And then as a result of that feedback, we took that back to the Gateway and talked to them. And the themes that came out of that, we then used to revise our complaint policy and to set up a new complaint investigation team. And then we told everyone that's what we'd done. So you were unhappy. You told us these were the things we need to address. This is how we've addressed it. And we'll be reviewing it again in a year's time to see if there's anything else that comes out of that. So I think the difference is really that, I know everyone says you said we did, but sometimes that's just a sort of list of bullet points rather than actual evidence of what you've done as a result.
Okay, thanks. So Nigel, then John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Denise. I was really heartened to hear you say that residents' and tenants' time is valuable, as that brings me on to an issue that, I mean, I served on Lewisham Disabled People's Commission, and our report is with the council currently for consideration. And Phoenix's inclusive practices were, we noted them. But we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis where tenants are, like everyone else, is badly affected by that. Too often we hear from landlords, oh, your time is really valuable, but actually we're not going to pay for the transfer of equity that's actually involved when we actually involve you, particularly if we involve you extensively, and that leads to savings and efficiencies, because that's not going to see there's not going to be any reduction in rent. So I suppose my question would be, how do you identify and deal with and mitigate the transfer of equity in terms of rewarding your residents? Do you pay your board members, for example? And given that your gateway model is there are very few gateway models. How would you suggest that other landlords, including local authorities, might do that? And the other side of that is many tenants have very challenged lives, and there are barriers to involvement. How do you go about identifying and mitigating the barriers to involvement, and what would you suggest that others do? Thank you very much.
Okay, so in terms of the first question about what rewards do tenants get for being involved, this has been, the first question is consult with your residents about how they want to do it, because so we have a gold membership scheme, and if you do a number of things, including paying your rent on time and complying with your tenancy agreement, you get a voucher at the end of the year. One of the things we're talking to residents about is actually, should that voucher be linked to, did you resident involvement, or should you get credit in terms of the level of voucher that you get if you've been involved in resident involvement? But that's one of the things we're discussing with tenants at the moment. The debate about paying people for attending consultations there's been very little appetite from our tenants for that, because it's felt that what we're discussing is how do we spend tenants' rent money, and which services do we want, and what are our priorities, and therefore actually paying people to attend will take money away from the services we're talking about. So that so far hasn't been that popular, but I completely get it. It's what instead people have said is there has to be, when you're having an event, there has to be an element of fun and community, and people are getting something out of it. It can't be come and sit around with a series of chairs in a cold drafty community centre at between 7 and 10 p.m. And so some of the fun elements of those events have come out of that feedback, which is, if I get an evening and my kids have a good time, I get a hand massage, and I get to tell you what you need to do about a particular issue, then I'm quite happy, and I get to meet my neighbours. It all feels quite positive. So far we haven't paid people for involvement. I think we do. We have vouchers for things like mystery shopping and some of the stuff. We've talked about doing it for people being on recruitment panels, because those are specific kind of things that would be done by staff in other organisations. So we're having those conversations at the moment, but at the moment it's largely it's not financially rewarded. The rewards are elsewhere. In terms of the barriers, no, we don't pay our board members. We have no, none of them. Again, it's been a debate, and I have to say I'm on given the amount of time and effort that our board members give, I was on the side of paying our board members, but some of those who are on universal credit said it would be more grief than it's worth, and actually we'd rather they didn't. So we're again looking at whether or not it's vouchers and things that have less of an impact. We're exploring that. There's another paper coming in about 6 months to the exec team, and one of the things we're going to look at is what other community gateways have done, and how do we get over those people who don't want ups and downs in their income for universal credit.
Okay, thanks. And John?
Oh, sorry, I was going to talk about other barriers to involvement. And I think I talked a bit about that in the presentation, and specifically about things like childcare. We'll pay for carers as well. If people have got caring responsibilities, we pay for transport for people with disabilities. We will, involve language and sign and things like that to try to overcome some of those barriers. And I think, as I say, the biggest barrier that's overcome is that sense of, am I going to be listened to, and have I got enough knowledge to contribute to this discussion? And the Phoenix Academy makes a big part of that.
Thanks.
John, I think.
John?
Oh, thank you. I'd just like to promote the CIH training courses. Myself and Wayne are currently doing it. It's really, really good. And like you said, if everyone knew everything, it wouldn't be worth taking any exam. But what it does as well, it gets you really reading around the subject. A lot of it, I didn't have any idea about license as a tenancy, or not tenancy, as a Kenya rather. But yeah, it's highly recommended. Very good. Can I also?
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's fine. That can I also briefly say, Phoenix has made me rethink housing associations. because all the people I've ever spoken to and involvement I've had has been extremely negative. So it's really refreshing to get to know what Phoenix are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say we are not perfect. We do get things wrong. I say, I think the difference is that we're working with tenants to put them right when they do go wrong. Because I know I'm conscious that there's this big kind of risk that we say we've got it all. We haven't. We're still learning. We're still developing and trying to get better.
Oh no, I appreciate that, but it's very much top down in my experience of housing associations. And it is really refreshing to discover there are good ones, very good ones like yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. So Wayne and then Kevin.
I'm sure you do get some things wrong, Denise, but great presentation and some great ideas there. I've been to the Green Man on a couple of occasions, and
brilliant.
Yeah, and I can really identify with much of what you say. Actually, it does seem like a very inclusive space. And one of the things I liked about it, I found it wasn't immediately apparent who the officers were and who the community members were. And I think sometimes that's a really great thing, because it just shows that freedom that people have to move around. I was wondering though, how did you build that, or what were some of the key things in building that culture amongst the staff as well? Because to involve and to work alongside residents, have you got staff that's been there for a long period of time? Do you have any sort of retention issues in terms of staff? And how do you sort of build that attitude of and that culture of engagement amongst the staff?
Yeah, so I think we make it very clear when we're recruiting staff that that's the expectation, and we do strengths-based interviews where we talk about how would you involve relating to people and listening to tenants, and working in partnership is part of the, is a big part of what we're looking for. But there are a number of staff who've been there for a while. And I think over time, it is just that constant engagement with residents. And it is simple things like the design of the building, the fact that you walk through that system all the day. It's also that we try to recruit locally, and about a third of our staff live in the 2 postcodes nearest to the Green Man. So that means that a number of people are staff and residents, and obviously we have to manage the conflicts of interest, but it breaks down that sense of stigma as well. And even if people aren't tenants, they might still live on our estates. Sure. And so they're neighbours, and so I think all of the things that we're talking about, the chat and chips is a really great way of building, and the diversity events, people sit down and they talk about their own experiences. And the Pride event that we did last week, we had staff and residents talking about their experiences, as well as the wonderful Jubeen Plummer. If you ever wanted to talk about LGBT housing issues, she's the co-chair of House Proud. She's amazing, and talked very personally about her experience. And I think that meant that there's that sense of trust. And I think there's something about me leading that as well. So I think everyone at every level in the organisation, is one of the things we're trying to do is get a sort of open culture where people can challenge and can talk about things and say what they think needs changing. And as part of that, we're always talking about, well, how does that work for residents, and what do you want to do? And there's all sorts of, it's lots of little things rather than one big thing. You can't just send people on this is how you do resident involvement. It's about making that just in the DNA of everything we do. So customer journey mapping, I talked about complaints, but we're doing that with each of our policies and procedures. So staff will be sitting alongside residents saying what went wrong, how could it get better, and then producing joint proposals. And just by working together, it does break down some of those issues, really.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Kevin and then Cyril.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really impressed with the presentation you gave, especially the fact that you're involving residents, you bring communities together, and you're giving residents a real say and a real stake in the thing that's most important to them, which is 1, the place they live in, and 2, the community they live in and they're part of. Now, the problem we've got in Birmingham is we're a massive authority, we're a huge authority, probably the largest in Europe, and the problem is that everything's just so vast here. Unless you're like
Yeah.
myself and you're lucky enough to live under a tenant management organisation, you know, you really are in a position where you're more of a number, more of a statistic rather than a face who's known by the housing manager on your estate and the TMO, who, you know, the TMO can support and they can, you know, give backup and assistance to. What I'd really be looking to look at would be to how can we get more TMOs set up in big cities like Birmingham? How do we go along and basically roll out some of the things that you've done at Phoenix, for example, like the fish and chip van that comes along, and you know, and the people from the different services coming out onto the estate and speaking to people, and how do we democratize housing more? You know, building that link with the tenants and joining the tenants and the services together. You know, like you would do with TMOs, because that's another big thing. And the final thing I've got to ask is how do we do, if we've got TMOs in the city, how do we devolve more powers to them? How do we go along and say, right, you know, a TMO is going to have a sort of chance to what can I say? You know, a chance to have more say of its allocation policies, especially in age-restricted blocks where you've got like shelter housing schemes included, and also how a TMO is going to have more responsibilities as well. So, for example, things like garage allocations on the estates, or you know, the sort of like contracting of services and so on. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say on that, because I think there's a lot that needs to be done in Birmingham. You know, everything's just too centralised, and there needs to be a greater democratisation of housing services. And you know, there needs to be devolution. So you know, that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think there's a number of different issues there. Firstly, in terms of the size, I think a lot of bigger housing organisations, whether that's local authorities or some of the larger housing associations, are starting to move much more to patch-based working, which in a way is the old tenant management approach. And even us, you know, I think it's 7,800 now. I think our website says 7,600 properties that we've got, but you know, moving up from 6,000 to that means that not everyone is going to come into the Green Man, and we need to go out and we need to, and people want to know. One of the key pieces of feedback that came from residents was, we want to know where our housing officer is, and we want that housing officer to know what everyone else in the organisation is doing. If I've, you know, ordered repairs, or if I've applied for a transfer, and we have 100% nominations with London Revolution, we don't have control over our own allocations scheme. But often what we want, tenants want, is a key point of contact that they can talk to and that will engage with that. So there's something about that breaks things down, and I think gives you a much better sense of, much better chance of knowing what's going on in homes and in services. And so that tenants know who to contact, and that the people on the ground can liaise with each other, both within the organisation and with other people working locally, to provide a better service. So I think that's one thing about size. In terms of democratisation, there are loads of different models, aren't they? So the community gateway is one. Some people would argue that being owned by the council, even if it is 60,000 properties, gives you direct access to local democracy. One of the issues about some tenant management organisations is some powers were devolved but not others, and that was obviously, you know, for arm's length management organisation, that was obviously a big issue on Grenfell. You can get that lack of clarity about who's got responsibility for what. But I think all of them, whatever model you've got, you need to be able to show that what you're doing is informed by tenants' views. And it's not enough just to have tenants on the board. Actually, just having an organisation that looks democratic because you've got a number of tenants on the board. I absolutely think that everyone should have more tenants on the board, and Phoenix shows that those associations which say, oh, well, the reason we haven't got more tenants is because we need people with expertise. Phoenix is G1V1, and in terms of the regulators' assessment, you know, completely bust that myth. And the board, I've been on a number of boards in quite a long career, and I have to say ours is the best I've ever been on. It's the most challenging and the most respectful. We had a debate about something that's quite contentious last week, and Carmen chaired last month, and Carmen chaired the board. She made everyone ask their questions first, then everyone got to say one thing each, and then there was a vote. And at the end of it, everyone came out and had, you know, sandwiches and stuff together, and people were going, I know you voted the opposite way for me, but I understood your perspective. And it was the most, you know, we have more votes than any other board I've ever been on, which I think is a really healthy thing, because people can agree to disagree. Sorry, I'm kind of losing track of what I'm saying. So I do think having tenants on the board is really important, but it's not enough. I mean, Rochdale Borough Council, which is where, you know, our Bishak died, was a tenant management organisation, tenant managed organisation. And they had had really good internal audits, really good gradings from the regulator. And I think I heard their new interim chief exec speak recently, and she was talking about what had happened is, because there were they were hearing from a lot of tenants, but not from all tenants. It was that hearing from diverse voices to be heard, and making sure that we weren't thinking that just the structure of the organisation fixed that issue. So you've got to continually work to make sure that you're working with people. And I do think the chip van and the local engagement is a key part of that. And if you centralise everything, you're never going to reach everyone. So, but I don't have an answer about which is the best structure. I think it's about the principles that you're applying and showing that you've done those, really.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cyril, and then Kate, I hope you still want to come in.
I'm okay. My question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go, Cyril. So, yeah,
Hey,
you come through.
I'm very envious. It's the advantage of living in the properties owned by a locally based housing association. I live in a sheltered housing scheme in Birmingham, Kevin. Might meet you one day. But it's a housing association that only has 647 homes. And those are managed in London. And they go from Hull, Stoke-on-Trent, Croydon, Brighton, Christchurch, and Paignton. Almost, well, totally impossible way of managing things in my view. And I'm struggling to think, how can I, as a tenant, and I've been with them for 20 years, and I was with a previous housing association, an extremely long established housing association. And I was effectively on the board, though not technically on the board with them. And I'm struggling to see how we can get some form of communication. Of those 647 homes, 6 are located on 6 sheltered schemes, which were defined by the CEO some time ago, not the current CEO, as the cash cows to cover the costs in London. So any advice and guidance anybody can give me, I'd be only too grateful to receive it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I hope the shift towards more regulation and hearing diverse voices, and certainly if Lisa, you know, it'd be interesting hearing Lisa's ideas about how we would do that. Should mean that your association has to think a bit more creatively about how do you involve that. So if the closest example I can think of that is Women's Pioneer, where I worked before, which had just under 1,000 homes and had 4 schemes for older women. Those schemes were all in Kensington. But when we were doing consultation, we realised that we needed to do some things differently for those older women's schemes. We absolutely did not use the word sheltered housing, because lots of the very feisty older women who lived in those schemes said it's not sheltered housing, we're just choosing to live with other women our own age. And some of us are completely independent. So, you know, the criteria you were at, you just had to be over 55 to move in. And some people didn't need any support at all. But of course, as people aged, it meant they stayed in their homes, and they stayed in their homes with neighbours that they knew and that they'd build relationships with, and did. We segmented the information that we got got through from we did the same surveys every quarter. So that was an idea I brought from Women's Pioneer to Phoenix. And we segmented the older women's schemes and general needs so that we could see whether there was a difference. And actually we had amazing, I mean, much higher than I get now, positive feedback from those older women's schemes. We get typically 95-96% satisfaction, which was unbelievable. And I was like, I'm not sure I believe these figures, but actually it was because, you know, the women living there had a very clear idea of what they wanted, and over time Women's Pioneer, well before I'd been there, had worked to deliver the service model that they wanted, and they were happy that it was going. And then we had one quarter where it dipped to 75%, and we were horrified. And so we went and did coffee mornings at all of the schemes and said, tell us what's gone wrong, what do we need to do differently? And what they said was, you've made the decision. This was during the COVID pandemic, and they said, you have made the decision for us about what level of risk we're willing to do. And you know, we're not in lockdown anymore, and we still haven't had our yoga class isn't back, our art class isn't back, we're not even having the coffee mornings, but you've come and listened to us, so it's fine. And the next quarter it went up, we reopened all the activities, and the next quarter it went back up to 95%. So those quarterly surveys allowed us to respond very quickly to the needs of a relatively small group of tenants, but because we'd segmented them, that gave us that information. And it was that you said we did. So you said, and they were really annoyed about the fact that we had made choices about risk on their behalf. And they were like, you know, I don't get to 87 without being able to assess risk and decide what I want to do. And fair enough, completely fair enough.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I don't know, I haven't got an idea about how you influence your own housing association to do that, other than giving you examples about how other people might have done it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there a last question for Denise? No? Yes, Sheila.
I just noted that Jo said in the chat she's had to go, but she was wondering how the principles might apply to dispersed rural stock. I think you've probably just answered that, but is there anything you'd add?
Well, I'd add in terms of one of the key things in areas where people are very further dispersed is about digital inclusion. So actually, you know, working with residents to make sure that they can get online so that you can get Teams meetings together. Again, it's one of the things we did at Women's Pioneer. The resident engagement and scrutiny panel continued to meet all the way through the pandemic because we had trained people in advance, and we'd bought people who were on that panel iPads because it was the easiest way, and we'd got a board portal which was very user friendly and easy for people to access the information without needing to be, you know, technical wizards. So I think there's things that you need to go above and beyond depending on the particular circumstances of your housing association.
Denise, that's been absolutely brilliant, and thanks for being so generous with your time as well. So if we can give you a virtual...
Oh, you're welcome. It's been lovely. It's been a really good conversation. Thank you all. It's been really good. The only thing I'm horrified about is that I've been looking like this all the way through, so it's not going to be a very flattering video on YouTube, but I'll live with that.
It'll be great. Can I make a couple of plugs for the Labour Housing Group? So we've got Jill Lang, who's going to be talking about homes, health and wealth on the 26th of September. You'll all forget, so we'll send you a reminder. We're working to sign up a guy called Alex Diner, who's going to be talking about Lisa Nandy's idea of moving properties from the private rented sector across to social rented, which I'm sure will be absolutely fascinating. Last thing, Cyril, is that you mentioned that you live in Birmingham, and we're working to set up a local West Midlands group, and Kevin's likely to be a key person. So I just wondered if you wanted to kind of stay on the call, and you and Kevin can share contact details.
Okay, yeah.
But other than that, thanks very much to everyone for attending. Thanks for some great questions, and we'll be back September time.
I live in Birmingham as well, by the way.
Oh, so stay on.
Yeah, I'll stay on.
All right, brilliant.
Thanks everyone. Really, that was really interesting.